everyone. I am very pleased to welcome you for this session. Whoever owns the sea owns the world. It is a very important issue, and our programming partner is the French Institute of Greece. For this, we have 5 speakers, eminent speakers, and I will leave the floor at the beginning at Olivier Poivre d'Arvor, who is ambassador in charge of the Poles and Maritime Issues. And I will give him the floor immediately because he has not a lot of time, and we have a very short time for all the speakers about this very important issue, because as you know, there is a lot of challenges for the Mediterranean Sea, and I think that we don't have enough time to speak about all these challenges. So for the beginning of this session, I propose to hear Olivier Poivre d'Arvor, and I thank you for being online. And you have 5-6 minutes to expose your vision of what is the Mediterranean today.
Thank you to you. I'm so happy to be not with you, but in Greece, but not exactly in Delphi. Can you hear me? Is that okay?
Yeah. It's okay. You can go.
Yes. You know, our ancestors wanted to conquer the sea, and so we do. So do we. The sea has been, in fact, embedded in our countries just forever, inhabiting islands and seashores, building ships, navigating the sea, fishing, and traveling across the ocean belong to the core of our people's story. Needless to remind you about the sailors' contribution, our sailors' contribution to the building of the modern world, whether through their voyage or their battles. And to some extent, one can regard the need to conquer the sea as a powerful incentive to progress. Accordingly, the ocean is often considered as another field for competition between powers. And even for a country like France, massive economic exclusive area at sea, a world-class navy, and one of the biggest shipping companies, but as big as Greece, it is impossible to ignore that our presence on the ocean is key. Indeed, the seas and oceans are spaces of strong tensions, spaces for strategic rivalry. They are areas where different forms of trafficking can develop, as well as illegal, undeclared, and irregular fishing. There are also spaces where the sovereignty of states and international law are called into question, in particular, the principle of freedom of movement at sea. And at the same time, there are spaces of intense economic competition, since globalization is first and foremost a massive maritimization of our trade and our values chain. All these challenges may be related to a single country, not to name China. However, we must now realize that our common good requires to preserve the ocean, not to exploit them only, not to get the most out of it. The ocean represents, as you know, a very essential asset for all of us, because today these vast areas, which occupy more than 70% of the surface of our planet, are also at the heart of the challenges of the 20th century. The reason for that is very simple. Everything that happens on the seas and oceans affects our future. The seas and oceans are now endangered commons. As a matter of fact, all life on this planet depends on a healthy ocean. It regulates our climate and weather, as generates half of our oxygen, provides food and livelihoods for billions of people, and drives our global commitment through transport and trade. The diversity of species found in the ocean will also likely provide new resources and ecosystems service for humanity in the future. Approximately 50% of the world population live adjacent to the ocean and are directly dependent on its health and functioning for their economies and survival. A healthy ocean is also central to solving the climate crisis and achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda for the benefit of all people and assuring global economy. So we are now at a very turning point. We need to strengthen and accelerate this agenda of 2030. And we have to go more in this protecting way than I described. The ocean is also a source of solutions to the sustainable development challenges we face. Investing now in sustainable ocean economy can improve and prospect all everywhere. And we must assume this interest and this responsibility with our partners on all continents. It is a time for observation, but for action. That is the reason why France and Costa Rica offered last year to us third UN Ocean Conference to be held in Nice in June 2025, preceded by a high-level meeting in Costa Rica in 2024. Our aim is to definitely put the ocean as a pillar of our global governance on the top-level political agenda. To that end, we have already invited all governments, especially Greece, who is going to organize the Ocean Conference in next year, and interested international organizations to focus on delivering concrete commitments by mid-25. For this obvious conclusion is the following: if we lose the ocean, we all lose the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this presentation, and I think it will be a good transition with the second intervention, which is intervention from Ghazi Ben Ahmed, which is president of a think tank, Mediterranean Development Initiative. And what is your evaluation of the situation, and what are the challenges the Mediterranean Sea is facing today?
Thank you, Chair. You will allow me to first of all, to say just a few words in Greek. As a Greek myself also, by marriage. Γεια σας. Είμαι ιδιαίτερα ευτυχής που βρίσκομαι εδώ σήμερα για να μιλήσω για το Μεσόγειο. Για περασμένα μεγαλεία του Μεσόγειο, ήθελα να πω. Τώρα θα με συγχωρείτε, αλλά θα συνεχίσω στα αγγλικά. I just said that the title of this session, which is quite optimistic, is not really in harmony with what we are watching today. And I will give you a context for the Mediterranean region, which is somehow bleak, not very optimistic. And I must say that for the first time, I'm not too optimistic about the fate of the Mediterranean region, and I will give you some facts. Let's put it like this: the Mediterranean is stalling, is going nowhere. Lack of vision, lack of initiative, lack of audacity, and of course, for internal reasons and for external reasons. I will summarize that very briefly and give you maybe what I think could be the role of the EU to address that. As Mr. Somoko said this morning during his introductory speech, we must find new ways for the EU to act, not only globally, but especially in its immediate neighborhood in the south. It was not always like that in the Mediterranean region. In 1995, more than 25 years ago, the countries of the Mediterranean region gathered and made the political commitment to set up the region on the path of growth, stability, prosperity. But through what was called the Barcelona Declaration, for those who are familiar with the Euromed agreements, it was based on the promise to enhance the cooperation, the economic cooperation between the North and the South in order to reach the economic convergence, in order to take advantage of this culture that unites us, North and South, which we share, in order to find a way to help economies in the South to reach the convergence with the North. It was based on what we can call now an old vision, which is trade agreement, basically free trade for industrial products, which will allow countries in the south to do subcontracting for industries in the north. And based on that, and with reforms undertaken, the idea was that slowly, the countries in the south would scale up their initiative and enhance, go to the ladder of development and go to higher value added. It was not the case, and the more for more policy that the EU offered to the region at the time did not bring its fruits, because clearly the countries in the south did not have any incentive to implement economic reforms. They stayed like, they stick to vested interest, corruption, protectionism, cronyism, you name it. And then there was no incentive to really to undertake economic reforms. Incentive, when I mean incentives, I have in mind what the EU did for Eastern and Central European countries when they were preparing to accede the European Union. At the time, really, the EU put the means, and it's not only a question of money, it's a question of carrot and stick. Becoming member of the EU was a very strong incentive for these countries, Eastern and Central European countries, to undertake the necessary reforms. For the South, there was never this carrot. Clearly, they were not meant to become EU member states. So the EU never invented something sexier enough to attract these countries to do the necessary reform. Since then, well, clearly, so the Barcelona Declaration and the Barcelona Euromed agreements failed to some extent, although in the beginning it was a success. The level of trade was enhanced, but never these countries were able to move up to the ladder of development and increase the value added produced domestically. Then the world has changed a lot. Since then, almost half of world production, trade, and investment is done through global value chains, mainly dominated by Asian countries. China, since its WTO accession, has changed completely the landscape of comparative advantages and took a big chunk of world production, exports, and investment. I'm going to list very briefly what else affected the region. So we have climate change, which is hitting fully the Mediterranean region, especially North Africa. I think one of the panelists will tackle more in depth the climate change. Then the Arab unrest failed. Failed in general. The last beacon of hope, Tunisia, entered a democratic recession, changing the constitution again, enhancing authoritarian regime. And the last nail in the coffin, if I can say this, was the agreement of Tunisia to renew the relationship officially with Syria of Bashar Assad, clearly and adding insult to injury, if I can put it in this way. So the Arab unrest did not bring the necessary reform to transform rent-seeking and state-dominated economies in the south to modern economies that embrace both open market competition and promote the private sector. We stayed in business as usual. All this was compounded, of course, by the COVID pandemic and its long-lasting impact, as well as the horrible war that Russians are doing in Ukraine. And not only that, but we have the impression that this Russian aggression added to what the Wagner group is doing in the Sahel, Yeah, I will, 2 minutes. Added to what the Wagner Group is doing in Sahel and trying to reach the conjunction also in North Africa, trying to take advantage of the vacuum that the EU somehow, even if it's not voluntarily, has created. As someone has said, the EU is the last herbivore in a world full of carnivores. And the EU must find new ways to revive Euromed agreements, and very rapidly through transitions, mainly economic transition and democratic transition. We must put that again at the center of the stage and not let maybe Italy be trying to secure an agreement with dictatorship just to because they have an agenda which they promote. They are promoting. And my last sentence, I would say, and sorry if I'm a little bit long, the ultimate objective is not to prevent 30,000 migrants coming from Tunisia or from Africa to Italy. It's really to prevent the southern Mediterranean countries to fall into Wagner, Russian, Iran influence, and then brainwash the youth in the region for much worse purposes and objectives than those who are migrating to the north for a job. I will stop here. Thank you, and maybe I'll come back later.
Maybe. Thank you very much. So, you said that there is a lack of vision, a lack of initiative, and I would like very interesting to hear about Tatjana Hema, which is the coordinator of United Nations Environment Program, Mediterranean Action Plan. So it would be interesting to know what are you doing and what are your action towards the Mediterranean, because I think there is a lot to do. So what are the priorities?
Yeah, first, thank you very much for the invitation. I would say something about what is the situation in the Mediterranean from the environmental and development perspective. Definitely, Mediterranean is a beautiful and attractive region. We all know about it. However, Mediterranean is facing a number of issues, both related to development and environment. In a way, I would say that is mimicking the global planetary triple crisis, which is related to pollution, biodiversity loss, and climate change. So we face the three of them in the Mediterranean. I would like to give you a number of, let's say, facts that are coming from a report that has been prepared by one of our thematic centers, which is hosted by France in Marseille. It is called Plan Bleu. They developed a report on environment and development for the Mediterranean, and there are very good points. There is quite strong development, but not necessarily the sustainability is ensured. So there is a need for a rethinking of the model for growth in order to bring the region to the sustainability path. Now, what are the most important sectors which are very important for growth in the region? First, I would mention tourism. And based on our analysis, it's expected that by 2030, we are going to have in the Mediterranean 200 billion visitors annually, which means that it's quite a lot, and this brings also a lot of pressure. There is a lot of development in aquaculture, a lot. In the last 20 years, there is an increase in the production of almost 4 times. There is also quite a lot of development on offshore oil and exploration gas, which can bring also important risks for the environment in the region. Fisheries are also an important factor that, in a way, are leading to a decline of a number of species. So there are a number of issues. And the last one that I would like to mention is the plastic pollution. I'm saying this because you all are aware that there is an international ongoing process for developing an international convention on plastic pollution. And Mediterranean is a marine litter hotspot, which means that the floating litter at sea is by far much more than the average compared to the global scale. So all are those issues that need to be addressed now from our perspective, because I'm here also to speak what we are doing. Our colleague, he spoke about the Barcelona process. Absolutely, it's a very important European perspective, or today Union for the Mediterranean, if I must say. But from our perspective, the UN flag program, which is the Mediterranean Action Plan, we are working in the region almost for 50 years now. Our basis is the Barcelona Convention for the Protection of the Mediterranean Sea. There are a number of protocols that the countries have ratified, so there are some legally binding commitments in order to comply with. And what we do is that we have taken together all Mediterranean countries, 21 plus the European Union, which is a contracting party and a very important one. So we have committed to take a number of measures at regional and national level to address those issues that I just mentioned, to adapt to climate change, which is an important, very important aspect of our work, to reduce and prevent pollution, to promote upstream measures to combat pollution. And there are very concrete commitments. I would like just to mention some of them. For example, you have heard about the Global Biodiversity Framework that was adopted last year in Montreal, in Canada, in the Mediterranean. All contracting parties, I mean 21 plus the European Union, they already agreed, for example, on 30 by 30 target for marine protected areas and areas under protection in the Mediterranean Sea. Is very challenging, is not easy. It requires quite a lot of investment from political and other incentives as well, but it's something that the region is committed, and we look forward to support the countries in order to comply with this very important commitment. There are also important commitments related to plastic pollution and marine litter. Mediterranean was the first region in the world to prepare a regulatory framework to combat marine litter. And it's quite demanding, not easy, but as I said, we as a secretariat, together with our countries, we are working in order to promote the achievement of this very important commitment that was made. So I can mention we are quite comprehensive, we address many, many issues, but what the most important I would like to say is that we don't look at the environment in an isolated manner. We are looking always at the environment in the context of sustainable development. We have also a Mediterranean Commission on Sustainable Development that our countries have developed, and I'm very pleased to say that the next meeting will be in France, hosted by the government of France, and we look forward to see how, in an integrated way, the region really could work that would bring its economic development to the path of sustainability, having a very strong dimension of environmental protection of the marine and its coastal environment. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. There is a lot of things we can speak and think about it after that, because there is a lot of elements you just have said. So I would like now to hear about Chris Brooks. You are Chief Executive Officer from CSignum, and I don't understand very well what you are doing, so it will be very interesting for us to understand what you are doing and what is your position to have a response to these challenges to the Mediterranean Sea. So you have the floor for 6 minutes, 7 minutes max.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So may I come with that question at the very end, if you don't mind. Let me start off with a quick anecdote. A colleague of mine from the US was at a maritime technology show in Florida a couple of weeks ago, and passed on to me this example of where we are. 100 years ago, if a raindrop fell on the state of Florida, it would stay within 6 feet of where it fell. 100 years later, it will inevitably find its way into the ocean. In fact, 90% of raindrops falling on Florida will go to the ocean. That example, I think, gives you a great understanding of how the movement of water is affecting our planet. We've done this through our own propensity to build structures that are designed to move water automatically and into the ocean to protect our farmers and so forth. But the issue is that this exemplifies why the ocean control is important to our own being as a species. But if that control means we need more data, and we do, how do we do that? There's a great analogy where we've sent, since 1969, 12 people to the moon, but 3 people to the bottom of the ocean. And that in itself, I think, is a tremendous way of understanding the challenges we face. Getting from here to space sounds incredibly difficult, but it's 1 atmosphere change. And that's not a big change. When you go from the sea level to the Marianas Trench, for example, that is 1,000 atmospheres change. And that creates a whole raft of how do you get data about the ocean into where we can understand it, analyse it, and see where it means for us, what it means for us for the future. 40% of the planet, population of the planet, lives within 100 kilometres of a coastline. 10% live within less than 10 metres of the sea level itself. That tells you how much we'll be focused on the sea level rising and what it means to us as a population. But let's be positive about this. I think that the future can be positive, and we must leave a legacy for future generations and our planet about what we're doing today that will have a positive impact. We must leave a legacy. But to leave a legacy, we must have a baseline of what we understand today, and then we understand what our impact is from the actions that we take today and tomorrow for the future. To do that, we need massive amounts of data. The data we get in the internet today is enormous, but not much is about the ocean itself. It's everything but the ocean. If you look on Wikipedia, it's everything but the ocean. And so what I'm suggesting is that we need to find ways of getting data from underwater to above water in a way that is conducive to our environment. Let me go into very quickly the challenges that we face with that. There are several ways in which we can elevate data from the seabed to the surface and beyond. Cables are the most ubiquitous. Cables have challenges, and I spent many years laying and maintaining subsea telecom cables for the internet. They have challenges in that they are particularly great in deep water, but particularly poor in shallow water. And by that what I mean is that shallow water will produce the most faults on cables. A cable will inevitably fail through what we call a splash zone. So how do you get data from underwater to above water? Acoustic is then the second most prolific way of moving data underwater. But as anybody who's ever spent any time scuba diving, you know you cannot get noise from underwater to above water or vice versa. So that doesn't help you in moving data to where you need it to be. So then what has become more prevalent over the last 5 or so years is optical solutions using lasers, particularly blue laser, to again move data. But these require exceptionally good quality water, and you also know that moving light from air to water or air to water, you'll have a refractive index issue which causes the light to bend. That will cause data loss. So there is a need for data for food, for defence, for climatic reasons, and we have a challenge on getting that data to a place where we can actually analyse it. And getting back to your original question, Madam Chair, where I come into it is that we have a technology that we believe is unique. And I'd be happy to share that with people after this show. But it is a way to look at the way in which to get data wirelessly from under the water to above water. And it's as old as the planet itself. And that's a big challenge, from our perspective. How do you get that data? And I think we have a solution we can look at. But there are still challenges. And the way in which you create the internet above water cannot be replicated below the water easily. And that's the massive challenge. And on that note, I shall finish up, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Last but least, we will hear now Jean-Paul Marie, who is a journalist, a writer. He knows very well the Mediterranean Sea, yes. And I would like to ask him just a question in 5 minutes. I know it will be a real challenge. What does it mean to be Mediterranean today?
Hola. First, I'm very surprised to be in the middle of the group of scientists and experts. I think it's a small mistake, but anyway. I'd like to talk today about Ulysses and Homer. Talking to Homer in Greece, it's a little bit audacious. I agree with you. But let's remember Homer. You remember that several times in Odysseus, Ulysses said, "We are taking to the sea." Very sad. We are taking to the sea. But he said, "We are taking to the Venus Sea, with a wine sea." It is a little bit strange. And we try to understand what does that mean, this wine sea. And in fact, if we go 6,000 years ago, we found that the world was going out from a sunny millennium, very hot, and we can find oak in Normandy, in France. And this came from seaweed, which is a very small seaweed, which is called Trichodesmus erythraeum, grosso modo. And this red seaweed changed the color of the water because it covers all the sea. And the Greeks, they didn't like to cross the sea because they didn't see nothing, so they preferred to be near the coast. And if you go inside this idea of the Red Sea, some people think that the Red Sea comes from this seaweed. So the water was covered with this kind of red seaweed. And when you travel now, and I did it because I wrote a book which is called Drifting with Ulysses. When you travel now in the Mediterranean, you find what? It's no more seaweed, but you find pollution. You talk about that. 500,000 tons per year of plastic in the Mediterranean, 500,000 tons. And I met a fisherman in Stromboli, which is Mario, it's a big guy, and he is in love of his island, of his sea, of his job, and he told me, look, I realize that the sea is dying. And it made me remember a movie, maybe you remember, in 1973, which called the Solent Green, where they found that the sea is dead. So the sea is dead, so nothing to do. So this contrast is very important between this global warming 6,000 years ago and today, which is a little bit, global warming is coming back, but at the same time with a polluted sea. Okay, so see, if we go back to the past again, we see that Ulysses is traveling from the known world, which is the Greek world, to the unknown world, which is a world with gorgons, cyclops, sirens, and so on. It's something very, very strange for them, and they were very frightened about that. And he went to the border of this unknown world, which are the columns of Hercules, and with a small island, which is a rock, very small rock. I visited it, it's very small, which is the island of Calypso, which is supposed to be out of the world, but inside, it's inside the world because this island has been a problem and nearly provoked a war between Spain and Morocco for the possession of this rock, which is not bigger than this house. So Ulysses explored the unknown world, but in the same time, if you think about it, when he finds the border of the unknown world, he defined by that a new unknown world, which is beyond the column of Hercules. So the sea is very big. So if we try to understand what does that mean, this question, who owns the sea? In fact, who owns the sea owns the world. But by experience, I would prefer to say who preserve the beauty of the sea, preserve the beauty of the world. And it is our world, our aquarium, because this is Mediterranean. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have just 1 minute. Well, if there is someone, one of you, want to say something.
Yeah. I just to add something about the need for partnership and coordinated action, because none of us could work alone and we achieve what we want to achieve. And from our perspective, because the colleague mentioned the Barcelona process, I did mention the UN program, but there are also others in the region. This is the beauty, that Mediterranean is offering a lot of actors to play their role and to communicate and to work together. And let me mention another one, because it's important for me, because we are part of it, which is the PAMEX, Plan d'Action pour la Méditerranée Exemplaire. There are 14 Mediterranean countries, plus Portugal, which are all together, and many partners that work in the Mediterranean. And the intention is to try to push forward the Sustainable Development Agenda, and working in particular on 4 axes that we just mentioned: the pollution, maritime transport, pollution from maritime transport, the biodiversity, and fisheries, and definitely to stop plastic pollution of the Mediterranean Sea. That is really a big problem for us. And I'm saying this because, as I said, in isolation, alone, we cannot achieve what we have committed to.
Thank you very much, and I think it's a good conclusion for our panel. So thank you very, very much, and it was a pleasure to hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.